I can say in terms of all the time I've spent doing radio that this has been the funnest week I ever had doing a radio show. Hosting my show Real Steel Sports every night at 8 o'clock and giving a different Super Bowl related or Hall of Fame related top 10 list. I've had a lot of fun doing it, and everybody who listened to me, thanks. It really means a lot that you guys took the time to listen to me. But all good things must come to an end. As my list of the 10 greatest teams to win the Super Bowl. Let's start number 10 and work our way to number 2, and I'll reveal my number 1 team of all time that hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. Number 10, the 1976 Raiders. Number 9, the 1999 Rams. Number 8, the 1992 Dallas Cowboys. Number 7, the 1984 49ers. Number 6, the 1975 Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 5, the 1966 Packers. Number 4, the 1989 49ers. Number 3, the 1985 Bears. Number 2, the 1972 Dolphins. And number 1, the greatest team to ever win the Super Bowl, the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers. Call me a homer. Call me a homer. I don't care. This is the team that I seriously feel in my heart and in my head is the greatest team to have ever walked the face of the earth. 14-2 and defeating the Cowboys 35-31 in Super Bowl 13. There's several reasons why this team is number 1 on my list. Number 1, the defense, 12.2 points per game allowed, which is one of the best totals since the 1978 rule changes. Number 3 in yards allowed, forcing the second most turnovers in the league at 48. They forced at least 1 turnover in every single game they played. In the playoffs, they averaged 34 points a game and gave up 15 points a game. And back then, the Steelers of the 70s had to go against the Raiders. Hall of Famers, one of the greatest teams in league history. The Vikings had several Hall of Famers, one of the greatest teams in league history. Oilers had a few, one of the most underrated teams in league history. The Dolphins had several Hall of Famers on their teams, one of the greatest teams in league history. And the Steelers were the best team of that bunch. And it only makes sense that the best team of the best era deserves to be number 1 on this list. In 1978, the Steelers had one of the most dominant rosters in league history. Ten players made the Pro Bowl. Quarterback Terry Bradshaw threw for a career best 28 touchdowns, which allowed him to win the NFL MVP award. You had Franco Harris, 8 touchdowns and 1,082 yards. Lynn Swann, 880 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns. You can make a case for John Stallworth making the Pro Bowl too. He should have been there too. 798 yards and 9 scores. Center Mike Webster, as a blocker for the run and for the pass, the greatest center in league history, for my money, could block Joe Green one-on-one. Speaking of Joe Green, made his 9th Pro Bowl that year with 5 fumble recoveries. Joining him were fellow lineman defensive end L.C. Greenwood with his fumble recovery and many sacks. Then at linebacker position, you had Jack Ham and Jack Lambert, 2 of the best linebackers in league history. Oh, by the way, at cornerback, you had Mel Blount with 4 interceptions, and he was the guy that was really the proponent behind the rules changes because how physical a corner he was. 3 of his 5 Pro Bowls came in his career after the rule changes. And then at strong safety, Donnie Shell, 3 interceptions, ferocious hitter, ferocious tackler, and one of the most underrated interceptors of the football league history. Got the most interceptions by a strong safety, and oh, by the way, was undrafted. Another bit of credit to him. This Steeler team deserves to be number 1 because let's line them up against the best teams in league history. Let's line them up against the 1989 49ers, and I will tell you exactly what would happen against that team. If they lined up against the 89 49ers, Mel Blount would eliminate Jerry Rice from the game. J.T. Thomas could shut down John Taylor. You have the safeties who are going to hit any of the tight ends that come over the middle of the 49ers West Coast scheme. That front four of Greenwood and Green and other guys like, whether it was White, it wasn't Dwight White and Ernie Holmes anymore. Dwight White was on the roster, but it was John Banaszak was getting a lot of time too at right defensive tackle. That defensive line could get all the pressure the quarterback all the pressure on the quarterback they needed to put on him by himself. Linebackers didn't have to blitz. If they did, they were getting the sack. That's how good that defense was. And then you had Jack Ham and Jack Lambert, who were just absolutely vicious hitters, particularly Lambert because of his style, and Ham because of how technically sound he was. The 49ers wouldn't score 20 points in that game. They wouldn't. And it's not like Roger Craig and Tom Rathman are going to bail them out on the ground. Oh, by the way, that Joe Montana, he'd get sacked at least 4 times in that game. That defense would be hitting him at every angle. Let's match him up with the 85 Bears. The 85 Bears, they crushed the 85 Bears. I'm telling you why. Because the 78 Steelers may only have one offensive lineman represent them in the Pro Bowl. But if you look at the guys that started on that line, you had John Kolb, Sam Davis, Mike Webster, Jerry Mullins, and Ray Pinney. Back then, the Steelers had maybe the best offensive line in the league because you weren't putting much pressure on Terry Bradshaw. I mean, that year, he was sacked 21 times and 368 dropbacks for a percentage of 5.4%. That's an incredibly efficient offensive line. And Bradshaw's a guy who liked to move around and throw the football. To get sacked that few times again shows how good that line was. That line cleared blockers like crazy. And that meant that the Hall of Fame receiver Swan and Stallworth could take complete advantage of the Bears corners that played man for man every single play. Swan and Stallworth would have a field day with that secondary. And on the flip side, other than Willie Gault going deep and Walter Payton run the football, who did the Steelers have to worry about? You think Jim McMahon, who for all his greatness won a Super Bowl ring and has been in the Pro Bowl a few times, you think he's seriously going to beat the Steelers when Bo Blunt takes Willie Gault out of the game? Ain't happening. Steelers win that game big. And finally, the 72 Dolphins. This game would be interesting, and they actually simulated this game, and the Steelers won 21-20. This game would probably be close like that. Because the 72 Dolphins were a very, very technically sound defense. Very, very, very mentally sound team. Not just defense, but team. Whether it be Greasy throwing, whether it be Zonka and Morris and Kick running. Very good team. The front four of the Steelers, which was the best at that time, and maybe the best ever, and the starting 5 offensive linemen for the Dolphins were so good they'd cancel each other out. And you'd have to spend a lot of time deciding, let's see, how are we going to attack the Steeler defense? Because you got to go against 7 guys. Oh, by the way, we only have 5 guys. And since Jack Ham and Jack Lambert aren't going to get beaten pass coverage by running backs and tight ends, who do you have to throw to? Absolutely nobody. If you look at the games the Steelers lost in 1978, they lost to the Los Angeles Rams in the Mud Bowl, in the drenched mud that slowed down their offense in L.A., and against the Houston Oilers at home in Pittsburgh. Now, the Oilers that year, they were a very good team. Lost the Steelers in the championship game. But once they had a chance for the rematch, that really showed the difference between the teams. And Pittsburgh won by 29 points. Denver was a good defense, good team that year. They'd just come off a Super Bowl appearance and had one of the best defenses in the league. And the Steelers ran up 33 points and only gave up 10 in that game. The Super Bowl against Dallas really is a lot more one-sided than the scoreline suggests. You see 35-31 say it was a close came down the wire. In a way it did, but the Cowboys needed a remarkable onside kick recovery to hope for another chance. And even then they only had like 20 seconds left. There was a point in that game where Pittsburgh was leading Dallas, who was one of the best teams in league history, the 70s Cowboys, by 18 points. If the Steelers don't put the tail between their legs and run the prevent defense, and they go for Roger Staubach in the last 2 drives the Cowboys had, Steelers win that game going away. For my money, the 78 Steelers, top to bottom. It'll be Bradshaw throwing, Franco Harris running, that line blocking, everybody in that team. You give me the 78 Steelers and I say, that's a team that'll beat any team in league history, bar none. Hope you guys enjoyed my top 10s. Coming up, I'll have 2 specials to upload for you tomorrow. The Hall of Fame predictions will be coming up shortly, whether it be tonight or tomorrow. And my official Super Bowl 47 prediction will be coming up later tonight. So stay tuned, everybody. Hope you enjoyed my top 10s.